Mira Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio.
So the Morning Drive. This week, Dubai is hosting the Global Family Office Investment Summit. It's a gathering that kind of celebrates wealth creation and legacy building and long-term investment strategies. But there is another side. Alongside the rise of global wealth hubs like the UAE, there's a lesser discussed issue which is kind of gaining attention. Opulomania is the word, and it's an addiction to luxury goods and high status living. So success on display, and is that fine, or can it become perhaps psychologically damaging? There's a question for you. Now, Jan Gerber is the founder, the CEO of Paracelsus Recovery, which is an international mental health and addiction treatment group, and he works closely with high net worth individuals and family offices around the world. Jan, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Tim.
First of all, can we start just by defining opulomania? What does that word mean?
Well, absolutely. I think it's important to state that it's not a clinical term, right? You don't find it yet, at least in a psychiatric diagnostic book.
I like the proviso "yet," but it's a thing, though, isn't it?
It's a thing, and it's a phenomenon. Let's call it that, rather than a diagnosis at this stage. But it's something that we've recognized amongst our client group, and then conversation with other therapists and treatment providers.
Right.
That it's actually a thing that seems to be on the rise. And if you ask me for a definition, I would say something is a problem when it becomes a problem, right? So there's nothing wrong with luxury goods or the occasional indulgence.
Yeah.
It makes you feel good, or things can be there are beautiful things out there that cost money, but that actually can be enjoyed. I would say a definition of opulomania is kind of an obsessive consumption. It's when the joy and the pleasure that one gets from that indulgence decreases over time, so that margin, that additional margin of happiness or pleasure that something gives you decreases, and at some point it just flattens out.
Right.
And when you consume for not for that pleasure anymore, but actually out of medicating an internal void or loneliness, or out of wanting to belong, wanting to be recognized.
It's kind of feeding the beast almost, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And it gets hungry over time.
Yeah, so it's different from just enjoying luxury or success. And as you say, if you've worked hard and you get to a point where you can afford, I don't know, the nice watch, the designer handbag, the fast car, whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
This is the stage beyond that where you're feeding it. It's a never-ending cycle, I guess.
The hedonic treadmill.
Okay.
It's maybe a term you've come across before. It's part of that.
Yeah, and is this something that you're seeing more frequently? You work closely with high net worth individuals. Is it something you're seeing more, or is it just that we talk about it more?
It's both. I think the awareness around what's healthy for the mind and what's not is definitely on the rise. We haven't talked mental health, at least not on a radio show 10, 20 years ago, right?
Sure.
So we talk about it more, but it's also the way luxury or consumption is being marketed and kind of almost shoved down our throats in some areas. That's definitely increased. Now wealth has increased, or is exponentially on the rise.
Sure.
People can afford more and more and more, and it's more and more normalized, right? Like 20 years ago, if somebody would wear a beautiful luxury watch, people would actually pay attention, be like, well, nice watch. Now it's kind of a given that if you're successful, let's say in Dubai, and you don't wear a watch that costs at least 10, 20, sometimes more thousands of euros, dollars, dirhams, doesn't really matter. It's kind of a baseline given already. So that's the thing, right? It's been the societal expectations readjust.
Do you know, it's something I never thought about, but you're right. Nice watches. I can't, and not 10 a penny, that's the wrong way to put it, but you know what I mean? I'm kind of oblivious to it now. Maybe Yeah, not that I'm wearing Rolexes or anything. I should point out.
Oh,
But
no disclaimer needed.
but it's a very good point. So look, the UAE is. There's no doubt it is a global wealth hub. It is growing at a pace that most countries are not. Do you think that living in an environment like this, because the Instagram of Dubai, the UAE, is certainly, oh, that looks nice. Oh, that's a fast car. Oh, look at that watch. Does living in a place like this increase the risk of those kind of behavioral addictions?
Yes, but for several reasons. The obvious one you stated is the constant comparison through social media and other people kind of living that lifestyle, and that sense of needing to keep up. It's subtle, but it's always this comparison, and that's I'm not quite enough if I don't keep up with that watch, that car, that job title, that
there's
house.
a status level that you want to achieve or
Absolutely.
attain or retain.
Yeah, and that's normal. It gives maybe a false sense of belonging, because in the end, all we want as human beings is to be loved, and often that is being confused with respect. It's not quite the same thing. It's this sense of we need and want to belong, because in the old days, in the tribal societies, that was needed for survival. We had to be part of something.
Yeah.
Now we have the sense that we are part of, let's say, the successful group, let's say in Dubai. We're not part of that unless we have something to show for it, right? That's kind of the subconscious that often drives this consumption. So that is one reason. And another reason why people, especially moving to Dubai, are potentially more at risk is, often your identity is a bit uprooted when you move here. So you leave your old identity behind, you build something new here, or you build on what you've had before. But in a way, and
it's a place of reinvention, isn't it?
In a way, so the moment you arrive, your identity is, all things equal, quite fragile, probably. So you're even more at risk or vulnerable for this kind of overconsumption.
Okay. So luxury is kind of part of the Dubai culture, the Dubai brand. I think that's probably fair to say. Most people would agree that there's something in that. So where's the line between, success, normalized success, and psychological dependency?
Well, as I stated at the beginning, the line is blurred, right? I say it's a problem when it becomes a problem. Now, how do we identify that it becomes a problem, right? One obvious telltale sign is if somebody lives just at the edge or over their means. Okay. That's kind of a black and white way you could delineate the problem. But when there is enough funds to fuel that kind of cycle, then it becomes tricky. So people who inherit a lot of wealth or who had a liquidity event or just so successful in their career that actually more money comes in that they could possibly spend it even on many watches and many cars and beautiful houses and larger and larger boats, and there are many people like that out there. Then it becomes much more subtle and much harder to actually realize that somebody has a problem, because it's normalized, right? It's actually even encouraged by society. That you get positive feedback when you show off your material gains. So those subtle signs that you need to watch out for then is, what does it give you, that next consumption, that next hit? So when you buy something luxurious, is it genuine joy? Do you enjoy the craftsmanship? Do you actually spend time to enjoy it after you purchased this item? Or is it just another car in the garage that, after one or two drives spins around the block, the joy kind of fizzles out very quickly. And the breaking point, or the point where it really becomes a problem, is when that line of pleasure is flat from the beginning. You get a new thing, you project it that it gives you something, some joy or hope or admiration, whatever, but actually you don't feel anything anymore. Just the guilt from having spent so much money on it. And that's when you're definitely in an addictive cycle.
Okay. And if you don't feel any guilt having spent so much money on something you cared on, I suppose that's another level further on, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Look, I mentioned the Global Family Office Investment Summit, and this is a very different way of talking about that's happening this week. But I think it's really interesting. How often do families underestimate the risks of wealth, the human risk of wealth, compared to the financial aspects of retaining and growing wealth?
I see that the awareness is on the rise,
Right.
but it's still, still negligible compared to the actual risks. Look, I think 70% of family fortunes are lost in the second generation, 90% in the when the third generation comes along. This term shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. I think the human risk of that, or the human aspect, and to a large part the mental health aspect of that, is way underrated. That's the main factor.
Well, I mean, it has to be, doesn't it? I'm thinking of I have a number of wealthy friends, and I see interactions in the family. The younger members have grown up with money. They don't know any different. They're free with it. I know, some of my friends who've attained wealth through real hard work and have slogged to get there. And there's a mismatch there that troubles me. It's not my place to comment on it, but it bothers me.
No, well, you can just observe the phenomenon without judging it, right? Because I think that's another important point, is we shouldn't really judge. It's very human. So imagine you're born into a very wealthy family. Would you say that you can really develop a healthy identity, in the realm of growing up in that significant wealthy success of your parents, often in the shadow of the achievements of those who came before you, compared to somebody who grows up under, let's say, more normal circumstances?
Well, I think it's significantly harder.
It is, absolutely. I mean, wealth is a massive force, right? It defines everything. And the schools you go to, and the neighborhood you live in, and to the degree of which car model it is that brings you to school, especially amongst the youngsters. I mean, everything is compared, right? It's when I was in school, is which team's baseball cap were you wearing? Are you cool or not cool, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously today it's often kind of associated with how much it costs, what you're wearing. So from a very young age, a very forming age, everything is kind of reduced to, in terms of who you are, and your identity is reduced to that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with this is, this is the issue. So we're at this point where we have an issue here. So there is an impact on attitude, perhaps on mental health, perhaps there is an addiction that underlies that necessitates treatment, I think. But it's a very hard thing to treat, because you're dealing with people who have wealth and influence and power, and I guess a lot of people don't want to admit that, with all this success, some mistakes have been made. I wonder where you start with that.
Well, again, we're talking about a phenomenon here, right? And I would say the majority of people who find themselves in this, let's say, compulsive cycle, addictive cycle almost, might never realize or let alone admit to being stuck in that cycle. The symptoms that you often see is more like anxiety disorders, depression, complete life dissatisfaction, to a degree where it's pathological, and people just need some kind of professional help to get out of it. Now that's the extreme end of it, right? I think there's a massive amount, a number of people, kind of subclinical, let's call it that way, who just feel stuck in life, not really happy, not fulfilled, and that they can chase that rainbow, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, until they, some of them realize that
I suppose so. I'm reminded of a story that I got told years and years ago. There was a footballer who played for Manchester United, Northern Ireland, George Best, who is rated as one of the great footballers of his time. And he was very successful and lost his way. And he was staying in a hotel, and the room service guy came up bringing him more champagne and oysters and the whole bit, and he was with Miss World in the room, and the guy came and put the tray down and said, "George, where did it all go wrong?" And it kind of reminds me of that. You know, things are so great until they are not.
Yeah.
And there's a tipping point.
There is. And let me quickly explain you what's actually happening there. It's obviously neuroscience, neurobiology is much more complex than what I'm what I'm explaining here. But if you want to reduce it to what's happening, in a nutshell, it's making money as well as spending money. And so it's the acquisition of luxury goods. It's a dopaminergic activity. So it's a dopamine system that drives that.
Sure.
So what the dopamine system's job evolutionarily is survival. It makes us get up in the morning. It makes us eat. It makes us propagate. But it's not the reward that it gives us. It's a chasing. Dopamine makes us chase.
Yeah.
So translating that into today's, consumer and luxury culture, the dopamine system is hijacked by that. It has an evolutionary purpose, but it's been meant for, the days where we had to chase for food every day.
Right.
Not for when it's around all the day. So it builds tolerance very quickly, and that's a big problem. So, when I went to school, when the teachers had the drug talk, don't do drugs, it's dangerous, and so on, we were told that the second hit will never feel like the same way as the first one of any drug, so better let it be. And it's kind of the same with luxury consumption. I mean, the first luxury watch, or the first luxury handbag, so all sexes out there can relate. If you do remember, it gives that pleasure hit. It's nice, and probably wear it with pride for quite a while. At some point, you get a second one. If it costs if it's exactly the same brand, same value, that hit is quite diminished. So it has to be already a bit fancier to kind of emulate that feeling again, but it still doesn't quite get there anymore. Now you take that to an extreme level. You have your 300-foot yacht, right? But at some point, I've been sailing around with it for a while, and then your neighbor gets a bigger one. Then you get an even bigger one. It just flattens out. That dopamine system is shot out, and then it just becomes a compulsion. And that's the issue, right?
Right. Okay. No, I'm with you. Do you think family offices, do you think wealth advisors need to consider mental health and this behavioral risk, if you like, as part of their strategy, their wealth preservation strategy?
That's an excellent question, Tim. That's actually what I've been, advocating for a few years now, and it's I don't know, it's probably not widely heard yet. Look, a family office will have some sort of risk management strategy, right? They hedge their currency risks and the legal risks, and have the lawyers and financial advisors and so on, and they take out insurance policies and so on. But the actual human risk, the mental health risk, the one that can actually sink a whole legacy, either by scandal or just really by wrong decision making and squandering, billion fortunes have been lost within very short amounts of time because of that human factor. So yes, absolutely, it has to be part of a strategy. Just out of pure sense of wealth preservation, let alone the individual, kind of a human pain that is avoidable, and that's there as well. So it's both rational and kind of an emotional side to that argument.
So you still have to be kind of look after the pennies, the pounds take care of themselves, even though you have more pennies and pounds than most of us. What are the early warning signs that someone's relationship with luxury has become unhealthy?
With the early warning signs, that's a tricky part, right? Normally people realize when you're quite far down the curve. There it becomes obvious. Again, if bags from luxury shopping trips stay unopened and just disappear in the basement or attic or storage, that's a clear. And we see that often actually. People go on shopping sprees, spend 5-digit figures in a few hours.
If your wardrobe's full of clothes with the labels still on,
or worn once, and then
right.
And then either you get a big wardrobe or things get cleared out. And we're smiling here when we talk about that notion, but it's sad and
it's serious,
and it's surprisingly common actually.
Okay.
Right, so there it's where it's clear. The early warning signs, that's a tricky part. It just requires brutal honesty with oneself, because I think only you yourself as an affected person can actually spot that. And that's, again, this flattening out of joy.
And, you know, what harm can it do? We've got the money. It doesn't matter, does it? I suppose there's that. There's always the puts off. So what kind of steps can families take to help develop a more healthy relationship with wealth? Because founders have done the hard work, made the money, had to slog, and how do you inculcate that? How do you get that into people's heads?
I think it all comes down to purpose, right? So founders often, they have their own purpose. You found this thing, you built this thing, you see it grow, and the money it throws off your venture, your family business. It's kind of a good measuring stick for how well you're doing in building and achieving that. But when that's been built for you, it's hard. It's really hard to find the same kind of purpose and drive in just continuing that. And you know, you can't exponentially grow into perpetuity either, right? So there's a limit to that. So the definition of purpose, what you actually want to do in life, what's a worthwhile pursuit, that's conversations that are much more important in such wealthy realms than it is for anybody else.
It makes a lot of sense. It does. Jan Gerber is the founder and CEO of Paracelsus Recovery. It's an international mental health and addiction treatment group, and he works closely with high net worth individuals and family offices. The backdrop to the whole conversation, the Global Family Office Investment Summit this week in Dubai. But Jan, it's really interesting. I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. It's Mirror Business FM.